What if I gave you a prophecy today that was fulfilled 800 years from now, and you and I were around to see the fulfillment of that prophecy? Well, that's exactly what happened with Isaiah 53. Isaiah was writing some 800 years before the crucifixion of Christ, but he describes that suffering servant in some detail. And I don't have time to get into all of it, but certainly I could read these words in verse 3. He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. But that could be any number of people. Verse 4, surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. Well, again, that could have applied to any number of people who were killed or crucified down through the years after Isaiah gave the prophecy. So we're still not convinced. And then in verse 7, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Again, any number of people could have fit that description. But it gets more specific in verse 8. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who will declare his generation? For he was cut off from the land of the living. Meaning Jesus had no offspring. He hadn't married, so there were no children born to him. But we're not finished yet. And then it says in verse 9, and they made his grave with the wicked, which is to say Jesus was crucified between two, well, they were called criminals. Whatever their crime was, he was crucified with them, but with the rich at his death. And of course, he was buried in a rich man's tomb. So there are a lot of parallels here that are a little more specific. And Isaiah could never have thought of all of that and put it together, and then he wasn't around 800 years later to make it happen. So Moses said in Deuteronomy 18, the test of a true prophet is that what he prophesies eventually comes to pass. Isaiah was a true prophet.